The first tremor of arrival was subtle, almost deceptive. From my observation perch high above the academy, I saw them materialize against the pale metal of the docking bays. Deathworlders, enormous, angular, their skin like fractured obsidian catching the sun's distant glare. Each step they took resonated like a drumbeat of inevitability, announcing the presence of predators long feared across star systems. But it was not only their form that unsettled, it was the creatures they brought with them. These pets, as they were casually called by their masters, were living weapons, claws that could shear steel, jaws that could crush bone, eyes that burned with animal intelligence. They spilled onto the campus like molten shadows, slithering, bounding, and lashing in unpredictable arcs. And yet, the humans did not flinch. From the center courtyard, I observed them. Small, fragile shapes against the looming predators, they moved with a calm precision that defied instinct. Their limbs were a language of fluid gestures, each step measured, each glance anticipating motion. Where my species would scatter in terror, these humans adjusted, shifted, and, astonishingly, interacted with the lethal beasts as if conversing with old friends. Their confidence was neither arrogance nor ignorance. It was a profound mastery over something beyond my comprehension. The air itself seemed charged, thick with the unspoken tension between hunter and prey. Each human motion sparked ripples of awe among my own kind, silent gasps of disbelief at the audacity displayed. One young boy, no taller than a standard cadet, crouched and extended a hand to a serpentine creature, coaxing it into submission with mere intent. I had cataloged thousands of survival drills, observed countless apex species, and yet here was a being who turned imminent death into a fleeting inconvenience. Time seemed suspended. The Deathworlders exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence faltering under the subtle tyranny of human fearlessness. I realized then that this was no ordinary encounter, no routine demonstration of skill or strength. The humans had already asserted dominance, not through weapons, not through ferocity, but through an invisible, ineffable force that radiated from their very presence. As the sun dipped behind the outer academy spires, shadows of the pets stretched long and menacing, crawling toward the humans who awaited, unflinching. I could feel the stage settling, the prelude to a performance that would test the limits of predator and prey alike. And then, without warning, a colossal beast, wings folded tight against its armored torso, lunged across the courtyard, jaws snapping. One human pivoted, ducking with inhuman timing, and in that split-second motion, I understood. This would not be a day of fear, it would be a day of revelation. The silence that followed the first clash was deceptive.
From the shadows of the surrounding structures, dozens of predators, larger, faster, more lethal, readied themselves. The humans stood firm, eyes unwavering, hearts unshaken. And I, a witness from afar, felt a chill of awe that ran through my very sensors. The proving ground had begun. The humans were already winning, though neither they nor their enemies fully realized it. The courtyard seemed to pulse with anticipation. Every movement of claw and foot, of human and pet, was a note in a symphony of survival. And then a sudden roar, a sound so primal and sharp it vibrated the air itself, echoed across the campus. Something was coming from beyond the walls, something the humans had not yet accounted for. The moment held, trembling on the edge of catastrophe. The largest of the Deathworlder pets, a creature with spines glinting like molten metal, lifted its head and fixed its gaze on a lone human standing resolute in the center. The hallways erupted in chaos, a living maze of teeth, claws, and raw primal energy. The Deathworlder pet surged through the corridors, each movement a testament to unbridled lethality. Steel-reinforced walls rattled under the force of their passage, and the echoes of snapping jaws and pounding limbs reverberated like distant thunder. I, hidden in a narrow observation chamber, tracked every motion with widening disbelief. And yet, the humans moved with a grace that defied reason. They flowed through the carnage as if the hallways themselves bent around them, anticipating every strike, every swipe. One boy, small, almost fragile compared to the hulking predators, dodged a lunge that would have shattered bone. His body twisted with inhuman precision, landing lightly on feet that seemed to defy gravity. Then, without a weapon, without armor, he manipulated the creature's momentum, redirecting it with nothing but sheer will and clever improvisation. The predator toppled into a column, momentarily stunned, while the boy continued his calculated retreat, eyes scanning, analyzing, orchestrating.
There was no panic among the humans, only controlled defiance. Each one radiated a force that warped the natural law of predator and prey. Where my species would freeze, falter, or flee, they adapted instantly, turning the hallways into a stage of unparalleled mastery. Whispers rippled among my instructors, warnings of imminent danger, yet even their most formidable threats seemed ineffectual against this human cohesion. I observed fear, yes, but alongside it, awe. Fragile and slight, yet indomitable. Fragile, yet shaping the battlefield itself. Every step they took, every sidestep and feint, rewrote our understanding of survival. The snarls and roars of the pets, meant to dominate, were met with human laughter and a cold, unyielding discipline. It was audacious, almost obscene in its perfection. The hallways became a choreography of life and death, an elegant dance where instinct clashed with intellect.
One human extended a hand, and a creature lunged, snapping inches from his face. Yet he tilted his wrist, guiding it harmlessly into a corner. The air quivered with the sheer improbability of it. My mind, trained to catalog apex behaviors, struggled to comprehend their logic. What reasoning, what evolutionary quirk allowed such courage? By the end of the encounter, the tide had turned. The pets, enormous and terrifying, hesitated, confused by the humans' inexplicable dominance. Not a single shot was fired, not a single weapon drawn, and yet the humans stood victorious, or at least unbroken, their dominance asserted through a force invisible to any but the keenest observers. I, an alien witness, felt a chilling mixture of fear and reverence. These beings, so fragile by every metric of my species, had claimed mastery over the untamable. And as the hallways fell silent, save for the low growls of recuperating pets, I realized this was only the beginning. The humans' ingenuity had turned the impossible into routine, and the next encounter would test whether even they could maintain such astonishing control. From the far end of the corridor, a shadow larger than any pet emerged, its eyes glinting with predatory intelligence. Beneath the chaos of the hallways, the true pattern emerged, not in noise, but in silence. From my hidden observation post, I watched humans slip into shadows like water filling cracks in stone, their movements deliberate, almost imperceptible. They did not merely survive the assault of the Deathworlder pets, they shaped it. Threads of intent wove between them, subtle and invisible, a tapestry of strategy that even my most experienced analysts struggled to parse. One human caught my attention, a boy of unassuming build, almost forgettable at first glance. He moved between clusters of peers with effortless ease, his eyes scanning, calculating, absorbing. Where the pet's instincts should have dictated every interaction, he found gaps, weaknesses, moments of hesitation, and exploited them with uncanny precision. I felt a prickle of unease. My species trains for millennia to anticipate the unpredictable, yet here was a human, reacting not to danger, but to probability itself, bending it around his will. I noticed how doors closed at the exact moments needed to trap or redirect the pets, as if guided by invisible hands. Distractions appeared precisely where chaos could be redirected, and every misstep the predators made seemed to occur in service of a larger plan. It was not luck, it was artistry, calculated, flawless, impossible. The boy adjusted the trajectory of a massive predator mid-leap, using nothing but timing and intuition. Another human nudged a creature with a glance, sending it careening into its own containment field. The choreography was silent but lethal, elegant yet terrifying. Even my instructors whispered among themselves, voices tinged with disbelief.
How could a species so physically fragile impose such dominance over creatures designed for destruction? Fear and awe intertwined within me, an alien observer grappling with evidence of something unprecedented. The humans did not merely react, they anticipated. They read the ebb and flow of life around them, bending predators, terrain, and circumstance to their subtle but absolute command. The hallways became a stage of shadows and intention. Every glance, every pause, every micro-movement contributed to an intricate ballet of control. I recorded each detail, the tilt of a wrist, the angle of approach, the pause before a decisive step. It was a blueprint for mastery beyond instinct. The Academy, a place designed to train the galaxy's finest, had been infiltrated by a species whose cunning surpassed all simulation, all preparation, all expectation. Even in darkness, the humans radiated authority. The Deathworlder pets, massive and lethal, were puppets to an unseen conductor, manipulated with the subtlest gestures. I realized then that to underestimate them, even for a moment, would be catastrophic. Fear, sharp and immediate, pricked at my consciousness, mingling with an awe that burned like a star. They were not only surviving, they were orchestrating, commanding, and redefining the very rules of predator and prey. A sudden movement drew my gaze, a predator lunging, misdirected into a containment corridor, its momentum perfectly channeled by the human's interventions. The boy emerged from shadow to shadow, vanishing before the creature could retaliate. The shadows themselves seemed alive, bending to his presence, the academy a silent accomplice to their cunning. And then, just as I thought the web of human control could not expand further, a new anomaly appeared. A massive predator, larger and more intelligent than any I had cataloged, stepping out from a corridor I had assumed secure. Its eyes glinted with curiosity and malevolence. The humans noticed immediately, a ripple of awareness spreading among them, but their response was not panic, it was calculation, anticipation. In the dim glow of emergency lights, the boy paused, assessing the creature, the hallways, and his allies. A single misstep or a single unpredictable reaction could unravel everything. And yet, in that instant, he moved forward, unhesitating, as if inviting the predator to test the limits of human mastery. The shadows held their breath, and so did I. The arena was no longer a place of order. It had become a crucible, a storm of instinct and strategy colliding in every direction. From my vantage, I could see the full scale of the chaos. A space designed for training had transformed into a theater of life and death. Pets, massive and terrifying, surged forward, their limbs and claws a blur of lethal energy. Yet the humans met them not with panic, but with an almost supernatural calm.
It was as if the very air conspired with them, bending around their movements, amplifying their resilience. A human girl caught my attention immediately. She was slight, unremarkable at first glance, almost too fragile to stand against the predators before her. But the moment she moved, the arena shifted. 3 enormous beasts, fanged, clawed, and armored, charged at once, each one faster and more precise than the next. To any observer, this should have been impossible. A single human, much less a young girl, could not redirect the trajectory of 3 apex predators simultaneously. And yet, she did. Her motions were lightning fast yet graceful, each gesture calculated, each pivot flawless. She leaned into the momentum of one beast, guiding it harmlessly toward the arena's perimeter. A flick of her wrist sent another careening into a containment field. A sudden sidestep drew the third into a trap almost instinctively. It was a dance of intellect and intuition, impossible to anticipate, impossible to counter. The Deathworlders themselves faltered. I could see the unease ripple through their ranks as they witnessed their pets, creatures bred for supremacy, maneuvered like marionettes in the hands of humans. For the first time, hesitation flickered in the eyes of a species whose dominance was considered absolute. They exchanged subtle signals, a mixture of disbelief and reassessment, yet no command they issued seemed to change the outcome. The humans had become an unpredictable force, an entity that could not be contained by raw strength alone. Every human in the arena contributed to the spectacle. They moved as a collective consciousness, anticipating, exploiting, and harmonizing with one another in ways that defied probability. Obstacles became allies. A railing collapsed in perfect alignment to block a predator's strike. A loose crate redirected a charging beast. Even the arena's terrain seemed to bend in response to the humans' movements, slopes and corners exploited with uncanny precision. I noted how they spoke almost imperceptibly, glances, subtle gestures, slight shifts in posture, but the coordination was flawless. They were symbiotic with the environment, each other, and even their adversaries. It was not brute force that won the day. I watched humans use their limitations as advantages, transforming vulnerability into strategy. They drew strength from fear without succumbing to it, converting instinctive panic into deliberate action. The girl's movements, in particular, were a testament to human ingenuity. She did not merely survive, she manipulated the predator's aggression to serve her design.
Each beast that lunged at her, each massive claw that could have torn her apart, became a tool, redirected without hesitation, without error. I could not look away, my sensors overwhelmed by the sheer improbability of what unfolded before me.
I observed another human, a boy who appeared weak by conventional standards, lifting debris with precise timing to divert the path of a leaping predator. He did not struggle, he did not falter. His every action was a calculated risk, a blend of courage, instinct, and analytical thought that my species could scarcely comprehend. The human's audacity was electric, radiating through the arena, forcing even the pets to pause and recalibrate. I realized then that apex dominance was no longer measured solely by strength. It was measured by adaptability, creativity, and fearless intent. The chaos escalated further as multiple predators converged. The girl orchestrated the movements of her allies, subtly guiding them to positions that maximized their effectiveness while minimizing exposure. One massive creature lunged toward a human pair, jaws snapping with lethal precision. The humans split and regrouped, their movements a combination of anticipation and improvisation, each motion forcing the predator into an error it could not recover from. It was a display of leadership, empathy, and tactical genius intertwined in real time, every action teaching lessons about the boundless potential of a species often underestimated. I watched my own understanding of survival shift. The human's capacity for resilience, their ability to improvise under extreme pressure, shattered the parameters of what my species had considered apex capability. Where I expected chaos, there was control. Where I expected fear, there was courage. Where I expected weakness, there was brilliance. I cataloged each gesture, each misdirection, each imperceptible calculation, knowing that this knowledge would redefine our approach to predator and prey.
The humans noticed it, their expressions unbroken, but I sensed a tension that stretched the limits of even their extraordinary mastery. The next confrontation, beyond instinct, beyond strategy, would redefine what it meant to survive. The chaos had subsided, leaving a quiet that felt almost unnatural. The academy, once alive with the sounds of snapping claws, roars, and the frantic movements of predator and prey, now stood in solemn stillness. I hovered in the observation chamber, sensors tracing every detail, every subtle movement. The humans had emerged unscathed, yet there was no celebration, no exuberance. Their faces were calm, serene even, as though they had merely walked through a storm that the rest of the galaxy would have crumbled beneath. They moved with a ritualistic precision, collecting themselves, checking their surroundings, and acknowledging one another with slight nods or subtle gestures. Each motion carried purpose, a quiet language of understanding that needed no words. I, an observer from countless worlds, felt a profound shift within my analytical framework. Humans did not simply endure, they transformed adversity into opportunity. Where my species would fear, hesitate, or retreat, humans confronted chaos, dissected it, and repurposed it to their advantage. The pets were returned to their containment units, some still growling, some subdued, yet the human's aura of mastery lingered long after the creatures were gone. It clung to the walls, to the corridors, an invisible imprint of control over the unpredictable. I could feel my own assumptions, hardwired, millennia-old beliefs about apex dominance, fracturing under the weight of observation. The humans had demonstrated something that could not be measured in strength or speed alone. I cataloged every interaction, every glance and gesture, recording each minute adjustment that revealed their understanding of life itself. How one human subtly corrected another's stance, how a glance anticipated a predator's movement, how a slight tilt of the head redirected a charging creature. These were not acts of mere survival, but acts of artistry. There was a calculated elegance in their courage, a deliberate sophistication in their defiance. They communicated without words, orchestrated without sound, and taught without intention. As I watched, a realization crystallized. Human supremacy did not rely on terror, aggression, or even brute intelligence. It emerged from creativity, empathy, and unwavering resolve. They could manipulate circumstance, anticipate outcomes, and coordinate in ways that no simulator or training regimen could replicate. My species, long confident in our superiority, now faced the unnerving truth. These fragile beings had rewritten the rules of apex existence. The humans gathered in the central courtyard, eyes scanning, still alert yet composed. a testament to their relentless vigilance.
I saw a subtle acknowledgement pass between them, a shared understanding of what had transpired and what would inevitably come next. It was a silent communication of confidence and foresight, a mastery over uncertainty that was simultaneously terrifying and inspiring. For the first time, I understood that humans were not merely participants in the survival game. They were the authors of it. Each choice, each movement, each measured risk radiated lessons far beyond the academy. The subtle lessons of timing, cooperation, adaptability, and courage had embedded themselves in my consciousness. I, alien and scholar, cataloging species after species, could not ignore the profound implications. Humans were not just resilient, they were revolutionary. And as the sun dipped behind the academy spires, casting long, deliberate shadows across the courtyard, the message was undeniable. A species so underestimated had proven it could teach even apex predators the meaning of restraint, strategy, and ingenuity. In every motion, every decision, humans demonstrated a supremacy that transcended fear and strength. And yet, beyond the quiet courtyard, in the edges of the academy's sprawling structure, I detected subtle movements, shapes that had not yet revealed themselves. The humans had triumphed, yes, but the galaxy's unpredictability was far from spent, and the next lesson was already approaching. Weeks had passed since the incident in the academy, yet its echoes lingered like a low hum vibrating through every corridor, every chamber, every observation deck. The humans had departed from the central arena and hallways, leaving no signs of violence, no scorched walls or shattered containment units, only a quiet, almost imperceptible mark upon the institution itself. It was subtle, yet undeniable. The academy had changed. The humans' presence lingered not in destruction, but in inspiration, a whisper of possibility that spread faster than any command or lesson ever taught. I observed from my station above, cataloging the reactions of other species as they moved through the transformed halls. Whispers rippled through the corridors, words laced with awe, disbelief, and speculation. Was this courage, or something far greater? Could a single species, appearing so fragile, truly wield the power of omnipotence without uttering a word or drawing a weapon? My instruments recorded facial micro-expressions, subtle postures, hesitant steps, but no measure could capture the weight of what had been witnessed. The humans' influence radiated outward like invisible threads, subtly reshaping the behavior of all present. Where students once hesitated, they now acted with renewed decisiveness. Where instructors had imposed rigid routines, they paused to consider outcomes, risks, and possibilities in ways previously unexamined. Even the Deathworlders, the epitome of apex predators in the galaxy, exhibited a newfound respect, or perhaps caution, when encountering humans. Their pets, bred for ultimate lethality, had been manipulated, redirected, and outmaneuvered with ease, leaving the creatures hesitant, uncertain. The unspoken acknowledgement was clear. These humans were no ordinary prey, no simple species to be feared or dismissed. I catalogued every action, every subtle interaction, every choice and gesture. How a human would sidestep a hazard before it fully formed, how they anticipated the movement of predators with a combination of instinct and analysis, how a glance toward an ally communicated precise coordination without words. Each act was a lesson in risk and reward, intelligence intertwined with intuition, courage interlaced with foresight. I realized that the academy had become a crucible for observing apex strategy not in theory, but in practice, observing a species that redefined the parameters of survival. The transformation was not solely behavioral. Across classrooms and hallways, subtle changes reflected the human's presence. Walls seemed less rigid, as if the architecture itself had been nudged into cooperation with the flow of activity. Objects previously used for drills were now employed in ways that maximized flexibility, creativity, and anticipation. Even in the quiet of the dormitories, I noted how students adjusted their routines, incorporating lessons gleaned from a species they had underestimated. The humans had not commanded respect through fear, but through the undeniable logic of their actions, a mastery over unpredictability that demanded recognition. I felt a mixture of fear and admiration, an alien consciousness grappling with the impossible. To underestimate these humans, even now, would be folly. They were not merely survivors, they were catalysts, agents of transformation whose potential extended beyond the Academy's walls, beyond this sector, perhaps beyond the galaxy itself. Every observation reinforced the same realization. Humans could predict, evade, manipulate, and harmonize with forces far more lethal and complex than any other species I had cataloged. They were redefining apex existence,
teaching observers like myself that dominance was not solely about power, but about foresight, adaptability, and ingenuity. In one classroom, a human paused mid-action, eyes narrowing as a simulation of Deathworlder behavior played across a holoscreen. With a subtle gesture, the experiment's parameters shifted, altering the predator's movements and testing multiple contingencies at once. It was deliberate, controlled, precise, a mind orchestrating variables in real time, unflinching and unshakable. In another hall, a human quietly corrected a younger cadet's stance, guiding them in anticipation of hazards that had not yet materialized. Each interaction, small in isolation, compounded into a broader lesson in mastery that spread silently but surely through the academy. Even my species, once confident in its own apex dominance, could not escape the revelation.
Every calculation, every algorithmic projection now required adjustment. Humans introduced variables that were impossible to fully predict. They turned uncertainty into advantage and danger into opportunity. I recorded these insights with meticulous care, knowing that the galaxy had shifted in ways that few could yet comprehend. The humans' lessons were not destructive, they were generative, expanding the boundaries of possibility. And as I observed the empty corridors, the calm, composed forms of humans now gone from the arena, I realized the magnitude of what had occurred. They had left a mark that could not be erased, a legacy invisible yet undeniable. Apex dominance had been redefined. A species that appeared fragile had demonstrated a capacity to shape circumstance, command attention, and influence outcomes in ways previously thought impossible. I detected faint movements at the far edges of the academy, shadows that had not yet revealed themselves. The humans had departed, yet the galaxy was not still. Something new was approaching, an unknown variable that would test whether human ingenuity could adapt once more against forces that had not yet been measured. The legacy of the humans was profound, but the next challenge awaited, silent and inevitable. From the highest observation decks of the academy, I watched the humans depart. Their silhouettes were bathed in the cold, unyielding light of distant stars, sharp against the backdrop of void and metal. They moved with the same composed precision that had defined every step of their presence here, yet now the chaos had receded into memory. And still, the weight of what had transpired lingered, thick as gravity itself. The galaxy would remember this day, not for destruction, not for carnage, but for the quiet, unyielding assertion of human mastery. Every action they had taken, every calculated risk, every maneuver executed with fearless intent had sent ripples through the minds of those who witnessed it. Across observation halls and distant colonies, the tales would spread. Not stories of weapons unleashed or blood spilled, but of a species that refused to be constrained by probability, instinct, or expectation. The Deathworlders, proud and lethal, had been forced to reckon with a force they could not quantify, a species that defied all known laws of survival. Their confidence faltered in ways subtle yet undeniable. Their apex pets, creatures engineered for supremacy, had been manipulated, redirected, and outmaneuvered at every turn. I cataloged each detail with methodical precision, the flick of a wrist that redirected a predator mid-leap, the coordinated glance that synchronized dozens of humans across the arena, the calm deliberation that turned imminent death into opportunity. Every observation etched itself into my consciousness. Humans had set a new standard for apex potential, a benchmark that would challenge every species' understanding of dominance. Our simulations would be rewritten.
Our councils would debate endlessly. Our histories would no longer measure power by strength alone, but by creativity, courage, and relentless resolve. Even the corridors of the academy, long familiar to the species that had walked them for centuries, seemed altered. The echo of human presence had left an imprint on walls, floors, and minds alike. The subtle gestures, the rhythms of anticipation, the unspoken communication, they had transformed the space into a testament to possibility. Where once caution had ruled, a new awareness emerged. Humans could alter circumstance itself, not through aggression or terror, but through intellect, intuition, and sheer force of will. I observed the last of them vanish into the docking bays, each step measured, purposeful, and assured. There was no rush, no anxiety, no hesitation. Yet in their departure, they left a weight behind, a silent but undeniable truth. To underestimate them, even once, would be folly. My species, long confident in its own apex status, now reevaluated every assumption. Every record of predator behavior, every lesson in survival, Every training scenario would be forever altered by the lesson humans had delivered in the course of a single incident. I reflected on the magnitude of their legacy. One school, one arena, one confrontation, yet the lessons radiated outward like waves across the galactic ocean. Humans had demonstrated that true power was not measured in physical might, in numbers, or in the brutality of combat. It was measured in adaptability, creativity, courage, and an unwavering refusal to yield. Apex potential was no longer a metric of dominance alone. It was a measure of ingenuity, empathy, and calculated audacity. And as I continued to watch from afar, the stars themselves seemed to pause. Even the void, vast and indifferent, could not ignore the significance of what had occurred. Across light years, the humans' presence had shifted paradigms. Even in silence, their actions reverberated, an invisible force shaping thought, expectation, and possibility. What had once been certainty, the apex position of my species, now felt fragile, provisional, subject to the unpredictable brilliance of a single species. I recorded the final data points, fully aware that these observations would be studied, debated, and immortalized across generations. The galaxy would learn of humans not as merely special, but as extraordinary. Their courage, precision, and ingenuity had rewritten every expectation. They had taught that resilience, intelligence, and calculated daring could outmatch even the most fearsome of predators, that a species could dominate without weapons, without terror, without brute force. They were an anomaly, a revelation, and a force that demanded recognition. As their forms vanished into the starlit horizon, a thought crystallized in my mind with chilling clarity. The galaxy had not seen the last of humans.
Their potential was boundless, their ingenuity unquantifiable, and their mastery over circumstance absolute. And somewhere, beyond the reaches of our current understanding, the universe itself seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the next chapter of human ascendancy.